When Harvard professor Henry Louis Gates tested Morgan Freeman's DNA on PBS, the results shattered a myth that millions of Americans believe about themselves. Freeman thought he had Native American ancestry. His family had told him so. He had the features, the cheekbones, the complexion, but the DNA said something completely different. And it wasn't just Morgan. Chris Rock was tested, same result. Don Cheadle was tested, same result. None of them had significant Native American ancestry. What they actually had was European ancestry, and they had been misreading the signs their whole lives. This is the science that proves most people read their own ancestry completely wrong. Across the United States, the belief in Native American ancestry runs deep, especially within African American families. According to national polling and the work of Henry Louis Gates Jr., nearly 1 in 4 African Americans, about 24%, say they have some Native ancestry, most often Cherokee. That's millions of people, each with a story handed down from parents or grandparents, usually centered on a so-called Cherokee grandmother. The idea is so common that Gates says, when I ask a black audience who has heard that story, almost every hand goes up. But the numbers behind these claims tell a different story. The U.S. Census Bureau reports that over 819,000 Americans self-identify as having Cherokee heritage. Yet, if you check the official rolls of the 3 federally recognized Cherokee tribes, the number of enrolled members is only about 330,000. That means more than twice as many people claim Cherokee roots than are recognized by the tribes themselves. For every enrolled member, there are 2 more Americans convinced they descend from Cherokee ancestors, many of them African American. The gap isn't just about paperwork or lost records. It speaks to how family legends grow, how memory fills the silence left by slavery, and how physical traits, like high cheekbones or straight black hair, are read as proof of Native ancestry. Gates points out that these features are often misunderstood. He says, the cheekbones, the complexion, the hair, people see those traits and think they are native, but genetics tells us they could just as easily come from Africa or Europe. Genetic studies back this up. Research led by 23andMe scientists Joanna Mountain and Kezia Bryce, along with academic work by Mark Shriver, found that the average African American genome is about 73% African, 24% European, and less than 1% Native American, usually around 0.7%. Only about 5% of African Americans have enough Native ancestry to equal a great-grandparent. Meanwhile, 58% have at least that much European ancestry, a legacy shaped by centuries of exploitation and forced relationships during slavery. This isn't just a statistical quirk. It's a measurable gap between what people believe and what science reveals. As Gates puts it, that Cherokee grandmother story, almost never true. The real story, written in the DNA, is far more complex, and for many, much more meaningful. Morgan Freeman's own ancestry, revealed through DNA, would prove to be richer and more unexpected than any family legend. Henry Louis Gates Jr. has spent years confronting the stories that families carry, especially the ones that feel too familiar to question. On his PBS series, Gates sits across from guests, celebrities, and everyday people alike who are certain they know where they come from. He listens as they describe a Cherokee grandmother or a distant ancestor whose features set them apart. Then, he quietly lays out the DNA evidence. Gates doesn't mince words. He says, the Cherokee grandmother is a cultural palimpsest, not a biological fact. DNA tells us that most African Americans carry less than 1% Native ancestry, yet the story survives because it fulfills a longing for a pre-slavery identity. The numbers are clear. Across thousands of DNA tests, only about 5% of African Americans have enough Native American ancestry to equal even a single great-grandparent. Meanwhile, more than half, about 58%, carry at least that much European ancestry. Gates calls this the hidden legacy of slavery, a record written in genes, not in family Bibles. He reminds viewers that high cheekbones or straight black hair are not reliable signs of native ancestry. The phenotypic traits you associate with Cherokee are more likely the result of African admixture, he explains, drawing on years of genetic research and his own family's experience. What people see in the mirror or remember from stories often has little to do with what science uncovers. This is where the tension settles in. DNA results don't just challenge family legend, they overturn it. Gates has watched the surprise, even disbelief, as guests learn that their ancestry is mostly African, with a significant European component and almost no trace of Native American DNA. The numbers are not just percentages, they are proof that the real story is more complicated and often more painful than the myth. Gates puts it plainly, that Cherokee grandmother story almost never true. Yet, in the face of these revelations, Gates doesn't dismiss the importance of family memory. He recognizes the comfort and pride these stories offer, especially when the alternative means confronting a past shaped by forced migration and exploitation. But the DNA doesn't lie. For Morgan Freeman, for Chris Rock, for Don Cheadle, and for millions of Americans, the truth in their genes is richer and more unexpected than any legend passed down at the dinner table. Morgan Freeman sat with Henry Louis Gates Jr., expecting to see his family's oral history reflected in the science. Instead, the DNA results told a different story, one mapped across oceans and centuries. Freeman's ancestry was 75% Congo-Angola, 25% Upper Guinea, with connections to groups like the Songhai and Tuareg. His father's side also matched the Igbo of Nigeria. There was no significant Native American ancestry. The chart was unambiguous. Freeman's roots lay deep in West and Central Africa, shaped by the forced migrations of the Atlantic slave trade. For many African Americans, these numbers are more than data points. They confront family stories passed down for generations, stories meant to explain difference, claim pride, or soften the pain of a fractured past. Henry Louis Gates Jr. describes the Cherokee grandmother legend as a cultural palimpsest, a comforting overlay on top of trauma. The myth endures because it offers an identity outside the shadow of slavery, a heritage that feels chosen, not imposed. Historians and psychologists see this as a coping mechanism. The myth of native ancestry acts as a shield, rewriting family history when records have been lost to violence and erasure. Physical traits, high cheekbones, straight hair, lighter skin, are often cited as proof, though genetics reveals these features can come from African or European ancestors. The truth is more tangled. Most African Americans carry significant European ancestry, a legacy of exploitation during slavery. Freeman's experience echoes thousands of tests. Studies by Joanna Mountain and Cassia Bryce show the average African American genome is about 73% African, 24% European, and less than 1% Native American. For Freeman, the science didn't erase his family's story. It made it more real, more complex, and more deeply rooted in history. Chris Rock and Don Cheadle each faced their own reckoning with DNA evidence. Both entered Henry Louis Gates Jr.'s PBS studio, certain their family stories would be confirmed. Instead, the genetic charts on screen told a different story, a pattern now familiar across African American ancestry testing. Rock's results showed a strong majority of West African ancestry, a significant European component, and no meaningful Native American trace. Cheadle's chart echoed this. African roots, a clear European admixture, and less than 0.5% Native ancestry, a level so low it likely reflects a distant ancestor at least 10 generations back. Gates, always direct, points out that when a DNA report lists a fraction of a percent, say 0.7% Native American, That's not a grandparent or even a great-great-grandparent. It's a signal from centuries ago, often the colonial era, and within the margin of error for most testing companies. These results aren't outliers. The numbers from 23andMe and academic studies align. The average African American genome is about 73% African, 24% European, and less than 1% Native American. Only about 5% of African Americans have enough Native ancestry to match a great-grandparent, while more than half have that much European ancestry. The European component is a legacy of slavery, forced relationships, and the brutal realities of American history, truths that rarely appear in family stories. For anyone reading their own DNA results, Gates offers clear advice. Don't read too much into small percentages. Anything under 1% likely points to a distant ancestor, not a recent family member. Physical traits, high cheekbones, straight hair, lighter skin, are unreliable guides. DNA tells a more complex, often more honest story. For Rock, Cheadle, and so many others, the science didn't erase their identity. It deepened it, rooting their family's journey in real history, not just legend. Today, the average African American genome is about 73% African, 24% European, and less than 1% Native American. It is a far cry from the family legends. Henry Louis Gates reminds us that the Cherokee grandmother story is almost never true. The real ancestry is harder, richer, and absolutely worth knowing. Share your thoughts below.